Welcome to the Meet the Candidates Night, January 20th, 2010 of the People's Caucus of Briarcliff Manor. It's great to see a slightly larger crowd this evening. I know you're all here for one purpose, which is to listen to the candidates, so we have some housekeeping things and we will hopefully get through those quickly. First, of course, I'd like to thank once again the school district and the administration and the school board for allowing us the use of this wonderful facility for this event. Second, I need to speak for a second about our television coverage. This meeting will be telecast on Cablevision this Saturday at 5 p.m. on Channel 15 and also at 10:30 on Monday night on Channel 15. For those who remember our travails of last year trying to deal with FiOS, which was impossible, I'm not sure if I have good news, bad news, or just plain news this year. But in fact, we actually finally found people to speak with whom to speak. And we actually have a time slot on FiOS, which is tomorrow at 5 p.m. on Channel 37. Now, those of you who are quick-witted will realize that how are we going to do that? And the answer is what they're going to be saying is the showing is actually last week's nominating meeting as opposed to tonight's meeting. And I thanks actually to Carol Blair for moving this. I'm sorry, Carol?
It's at 8 o'clock.
I'm sorry, 8 o'clock? Then I stand corrected. It's 8 p.m., not 5 p.m. Tomorrow evening. And I thank Carol Blair for pushing this along because at one point we were going to be shown 3 weeks from today. And then she figured out the priorities thing, and so we are slightly ahead of ice fishing on Hudson Bay competitions. And it's clear that FiOS is not interested in current event coverage, but nevertheless, this is a lot better than last year. It's a start, and hopefully we will get even better next year, but it's something. So I see no point, frankly, in investing the money in overnighting tapes down to Reston, Virginia for this evening's meeting, which will not be shown at best until the day after we all vote next week. So we will not do that, but hopefully we'll do better next year. So thanks, Carol, for your efforts on this, and next year hopefully we'll be better. Next item on the agenda is approval of minutes of our meeting of January 21st, 2009. And as is our custom, I would entertain a motion to waive the reading of the minutes and approve them as drafted. Mr. Sharman, as second. Mr. Malik, all in favor, please say aye. Aye, opposed? Thank you. The next item on the agenda is election of the executive committee. When there are not more candidates than there are positions, then we ask for a motion from the floor, and I will read it, which essentially directs the secretary to cast a vote for the slate. I will be specific. Resolved that the secretary shall be directed to cast one vote for candidates Keith Austin, chair, Paul Wasserman, vice chair, Shelley Polton, secretary, and Mark Pohar, treasurer, to serve as the caucus's executive committee for one-year terms commencing April 1st, 2010. May I please have a motion? Mr. Vendetti, thank you. Second, Ms. Hayda, thank you. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you. Then we move on to our next item on the agenda, which are special voting meeting arrangements for January 27th. As I mentioned last week, we had actually raised this at last year's meetings, that because of budgetary constraints, we were going to revert to paper ballots in case there was a contested election. Following last week's meeting, a group of our colleagues got together and very graciously volunteered to fund the rental of voting machines if, in fact, we could so arrange that to happen. And I'm very pleased to report that, in fact, that is possible, and therefore we will have voting machines on the 27th instead of paper ballots. So our thanks to those folks who really were willing to do this. Really, we certainly can run an election in a secure sense either way, but it certainly is it certainly facilitates tabulation and I think confidence in the system and other things. So it's great that you're all doing that, and we will all thank you for doing so. I'm going to digress for a minute. That raises a question of, though, how do we proceed in the future? This became a scramble. Is there money? There's money. Normally, there's more lead time associated with getting machine rental approval than just a week. And so we were very fortunate that in this particular case, we had the cooperation and assistance of our village clerk, Christine Dennett, the town clerk, Mary Ann Roberts, and even especially the County Board of Elections. And so this approval process went through quite expeditiously, helped in no small measure by Paul Wasserman's ability to push wet noodles through very small keyholes. But that's not a great way to do it. If we know what we're planning for, it's much better. I'm not proposing anything to discuss tonight, but I would offer a suggestion about how we might deal with this, something like this in the future. I can visualize something perhaps as a escrow account set up totally apart, segregated from Caucus general fund. And that could be funded with sufficient money for 1 year's rental. If there is a contested caucus, we would draw it down. If there's not, we would not. It would be totally transparent, reported, and so on. There may be other schemes, there are possibilities, but it's better to be able to have the funds in hand so that you know you can actually plan on it and do it, rather than scramble at the last minute. So I leave that a thought like that, the general thought, for your consideration, and perhaps in the coming months, once we get past next Wednesday's voting, we can discuss this further. I just offer that. The second thing, of course, pertaining to this is the general financial situation of the caucus. In past years, where contested elections were more the rule than the exception, there was always a large crowd, there was always a large donation, allowed us to fund voting machines, also to cover our operating expenses. As we've had fewer contested election, audiences have diminished, the contributions have diminished, understandably. Last week we had a very, very positive donation level relative to the number of people who were here. There just weren't very many people here. And so we collected last week $649 on a per capita basis. It was a very, very nice, generous donation. That doesn't get us there in terms of our annual expenses. And in fact, for the last 3 years, the Caucus Executive Committee themselves, in each of the last 3 years, the Caucus Executive Committee has actually contributed more than that to keep essentially to close the books. So this is not a good state, and I don't want to belabor the point other than two things. Number one is, for any of those who were not here last week who can contribute again, we're not going to pass the hat, but the hat is back there on the table on your way out. We'd appreciate whatever you can do. And the second is that if any of you have any ideas for effective fundraising techniques, we would love to know what they are, and would especially love it if you not only had ideas, but were willing to work with us on how to implement them. So with that, I will shut up on the subject of finance, unless there are any questions at all on that general topic which anyone wants to raise. Otherwise, we'll move along. Okay, good. Now, voting arrangements for the 27th. First of all, in-person voting. Voting will be at the Teen Center behind the municipal building from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. And it will, as I said, it will be machine voting. The process will look virtually, now that we have machines, the process will look virtually the same as it did when you voted last March in the village election, and it'll look virtually the same as you vote on March 16th in the next village election. You'll walk in, there will be sign-in tables. You will seat people sitting behind those tables with the same county register book. You will sign the book. Someone else will make a tally sheet. You'll go over the machine, you will pull a lever, and you will leave. It will look just like any other election. For the most part, it will be run along the same general rule set as any village election. There are a couple of exceptions we'll get to. For those people who are registered, of course, this is simple. You just come in like you always did. Some people will come and they will not be registered, and there are a number of reasons for that. Young child just came in, that just turned 18. Mom or dad says, let's go vote. Kid isn't registered. You can register there. You can register for the caucus. This does not register you for a village election. It registers you for the caucus. You're just going to go through a separate procedure to get registered, and you have to show, bring with you something that proves what your domicile is. And you also fill out an affidavit which swears that you are a citizen of the United States and so on. Not difficult. There will be people who come who mistakenly, I've always voted, but in fact they are often residents of the school district but not in the village. They think of themselves as part of the village and they come to vote, and they won't be allowed to vote. So we will have a process set up for this, and it's no different than it would be in the March elections. So I think that you will find this process perfectly normal, just like you were used to. Are there any questions at all about voting in person on the 27th? Now, you also have the option for absentee balloting, absentee voting. And in this particular case, we would ask that you go to our website, americantowns.com/People's Caucus, right up there on the wall. Also a trailer on the recording of this event. And there's a tab called Files. You go into Files, and there are the instructions for how to do an absentee ballot. And it's the same essentially as I just described for in-place voting on voting day. There's one set of instructions for people who are already registered voters and one for who are not. And what you basically do as an absentee ballot person is you print the ballot, you fill it out, you put it in a unmarked plain envelope. Do not put your name on it, please. And you take that envelope, you fill out an affidavit which certifies I do swear under threat of perjury that I am blah, 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 blah. And then you put the affidavit and you put the envelope into a larger envelope and you mail it to People's Caucus, P.O. Box 301, Radcliffe Manor, New York, 10510. It must be received by the night of the day before, the 26th. Because in the morning of the 27th, we'll pick all these up and we'll seal them up and we'll count them later in the evening. So it's a simple kind of a thing. Now, if you are not a registered voter and you want to vote absentee, then same general thing as if you showed up. What you with one exception, instead of swearing before myself or Ken Malik, who will be the floor chairman, so to speak, of the voting day, that you are actually a citizen of the United States, you will have to go to the a notary and make that declaration. I think this is a small number of people. I hope it is. But nevertheless, it's a relatively straightforward procedure. And again, this is not so terribly different than anything you would do in a regular election. So we have two ways to vote, in person or absentee. We've made the absentee process about as, I think, frankly, as painless as we possibly can and still have integrity. On voting night, after we do the machine tally, we will then do the absentee ballot tally. And that, of course, is time-consuming because it's paper ballots. And the first thing we have to do is to make sure that anyone who has submitted an absentee ballot has not already voted in person. So we will be doing a comparison of who voted that day versus who's given an absentee ballot. That may take us some time, depending on how many people choose to go absentee. But by the end of the night, we will know who our two candidates are for the people's line on the March slate. I wanted to correct one thing I said last meeting. I think I mentioned that you have to be 18 years of age on the date of the March 16th election. That is incorrect. You have to be 18 years of age on the date of actually this event, which is the 27th. So I was incorrect on that. I apologize if that confused anyone. But if you make it on the 27th, then you're there on the 16th anyway, so I don't think that hurts. Are there any questions about absentee balloting? There are also about 25 or 30 copies of a summary of the absentee balloting process on the table back there, if you want to pick one up on the way out. For tabulation of the results, the inspectors will need a relatively quiet and secure area in which to do the tabulations. The candidates are allowed to either be present themselves for the tabulation or to have their authorized representative to be there on their behalf, only one person for each. and you don't interfere, you observe. Now, there are things we will, if we get to an absentee ballot which says, for example, we're going to disallow this for the following reasons, we will make this clear to people. And remember, when we disallow an absentee ballot, we don't know how that person voted. We are only looking at the qualification, if you will. So it's not that we are a vote for Anthony or not a vote for Bob or Kim or anything. This is strictly a matter of whether or not the documentation was sufficiently accurate to allow this person's ballot to be included. Nevertheless, you are each, all three of you, allowed to have yourselves or someone else on your behalf present while we do this. So you can think about that. If it's someone else besides yourselves, I just want to have it in something in writing that so specifies. Are there any questions at all about tabulation? Okay. We will know by sometime late on the 27th who our two candidates are, and then we need to start circulating nominating petitions. I will have the nominating petitions ready by roughly late morning, the following morning on the 28th, that's a Thursday, and we need to have our petitions in to Paul Wasserman, Vice Chair, by Monday, 11 a.m. on the 8th of February. And the reason is because the deadline for filing petitions is the 9th of February. And before we file petitions, we look at every petition, we verify that everyone on who signed a petition is a member of the Village of Briarcliff Manor, is a city, blah, 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 blah. So last year, we probably scrubbed more than 10% of all the names because they did not live in the village, because they were illegible. They signed 2 or 3 times sometimes. So we go through a scrubbing process. We have to have 100 valid signatures. We would like at least 200 valid signatures, because when you get a lot of valid signatures, number one is you got a lot of wiggle room on challenges, and the second is that, of course, the more people who sign, the more people who are engaged in the process, and engagement in the process is good. So we will have the petitions ready roughly around 11 a.m. or so, mid-morning on the 28th, ready to go. I had asked all the candidates to kind of have their teams of supporters ready in case they're the lucky 2 out of 3 to circulate the petitions. Of course, the executive committee will also circulate petitions. But Paul will be running the petition circulation process. Are there any questions at all about petition circulation? There will be instructions to go with each petition. I would only restate, do not sign a petition you witness yourself, that is, that you are circulating. Don't indiscriminately circulate petitions at a basketball game, because you undoubtedly are going to pick up those people who do not live in the village but live in the school district, and so on. It's helpful if they're legible. Actually, legibility is really helpful. Are there any questions at all about nominating petition process? We'll get a lot closer to that. I think once we get to the 27th, 28th, but it's very good. It's very helpful if we have organized groups ready to hit the ground. We have 2 weekends, including Super Bowl weekends, and Super Bowl weekend to get these petitions done. And so we should be able to do pretty well, even though it's a compressed time frame. Is that clear? Okay. Now then, we will get to the main event, which is Meet the Candidates Night. And our 3 candidates are here with us. The process is the same as we've done for many years. I was going to say, we will be passing out cards, but I already have a whole bunch of cards. Nevertheless, Carol and Lynn will be patrolling the aisles with cards for you to write your questions down, and they will be given to me. And I will sort the questions in terms of a couple of things. The first is, we do not allow questions of a personal nature or attacks or so on, and they must be relevant to village matters. Iran is an interesting place, and there are other interesting issues in the world, but we are here focusing on village matters, and so unless there's some real nexus going on, we are not here to talk about the school board or the county or anything else. We're here to talk about the village. The second is that if there are many questions on the same topic, I will sort of sift them and combine them. If there are enough of them and they are rich enough, we might even have a kind of a follow-up scheme and so on. But we'll see how that plays out. That goes by ear. To begin with, each candidate will have will be allowed an opening statement of 5 minutes and on whatever they choose to say, and then we'll get in the question and answer period. When we're in the Q&A process, each candidate will have an opportunity of 3 minutes, not to exceed 3 minutes, to answer a question, and at the end, they will each be allowed a 3-minute closing statement. Now, when we do the question and answer process, we will basically sequence it so that, for example, if the first question goes to the first question goes to Kim at the end, let's say the second question would start with Anthony, the third question would start with Bob. You can direct a question to a person, in which case we would just start with, say, Anthony, and we would go around. If all of the questions start becoming directed to one person, that ain't a fair ball game, and that's going to stop. So, because you can't have one where one person is answering first all the time, and then the other two just go bang, bang. So we're not going to allow that. We had some feedback from both people who watch the Cablevision broadcast, as also from the FiOS technical people, that there were some quality problems with the recording that was being shown, although they didn't exactly agree on the problem. So I'm going to ask the candidates when they speak to make sure that they speak directly into the microphone and not let their vision or their head wander around and lose focus on the mic. So please speak directly to the microphone, even if it means you're maybe not making the eye contact that you would perhaps like to be making through the room. Are there any questions at all with the process, procedure, anything we've covered so far? Otherwise, we'll get straight to the candidates. All set?
Good.
Okay. All right, then we've gone through our usual flip the coin process. And so we will start first off on the opening statement with Kim Izzarelli.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Keith, and People's Caucus and everyone here and at home watching tonight. I have a little slight housekeeping of my own tonight. When Mr. Chatur nominated me last week, he mentioned that I was a fundraiser on the library project, and I of all the things to punt on, I guess that was not true. I think he was actually referencing the fundraising effort for the library when Peter Borjo was trustee, which I did work on. So I know it was an enormous effort, and I don't want to slight anyone on their volunteerism, but I did not work on the recent fundraising for the library. I've been looking forward to this Meet the Candidate session and having an opportunity to hear from all of you, the members of the public, and your questions and concerns. And as I said in the nominating session, I offer my time, talent, experience, and enthusiasm. And most of all, I bring fresh new ideas to the village government. I believe the public should have as much involvement and input as possible, whether it means observing or participating in a work session, forming a committee, having an opportunity to provide meaningful public comment on a particular issue. We are a bright, highly educated community, arguably some of the brightest minds. We should be able to tap into our intellectual resources and work together to resolve issues in a civilized, constructive, and equitable manner as reasonable people. I hope you also take time to ask me tonight about my professional experience. I worked in retirement plans and in the employee benefit arena since graduate school. I took a brief break, or a little longer, to have raise my family, and currently I'm a compliance analyst and internal auditor with a large pension and investment firm. Most taxpayers probably are not aware that 70 cents or almost 70 cents of every tax dollar you spend for government, at least in Westchester, goes to some form of labor or employee benefits or compensation. And I think we tend to focus a lot of time and debate on, especially in forums like this, on sort of tangible line items, but it's employee compensation that has become a significant rising cost in government, not only here, but across the country. So I'm here to offer my expertise to the village. I'm very happy to do that as a trustee. And last, I put forth 3 ideas in my nominating speech, and I'd like to have the opportunity to talk about them more and have your questions. One is a proposal to do some contingency planning in the area of our pending affordable housing mandate. Another is a proposal for a program to retain empty nesters and senior citizens in our community, as they are vital to the economic core of this village. And the third proposal was a